Hello and welcome to a joint presentation by Core and Philips regarding navigating the complexities of remote patient monitoring deployments. My name is Brian Lubell and I'm the Executive Vice President of IoT Managed Services for Core, formerly the President of Integron, which was recently acquired by Core. And Integron has an extensive portfolio of healthcare and life sciences IoT services that we've been offering to the marketplace. I'd like to introduce Odd from Philips.
Hi, my name is Odd Dijkhoff. I'm heading up business development for the Philips HealthSuite digital platform, collaborating with Core Wireless, with Brian Lubell and team in providing solutions for the clinical trial remote patient monitoring space.
Thanks, Odd. So for today's discussion, I'd kind of like to start out by setting the landscape and what's happening in connected health and where we're seeing connected health evolve. And in today's market, we're seeing really very specific areas that are accelerating adoption and looking to yield the benefit of connection and IoT enablement for healthcare, remote patient monitoring, and clinical drug trials. Specifically, for stationary medical devices, so having medical devices that have very precise maintenance controls around regulatory compliance in terms of how they are administered and managed, and how we collect data from them to ensure that they are performing properly and providing the highest level of effectiveness in the marketplace. The second area is in implanted medical devices. So these are long-term devices, for example, cardiac rhythm monitoring implants, pacemakers, pacemaker defibrillators, drug therapy implants, and as well as other chronic diseases that are migrating like diabetes and others that would be using implantable technology that requires monitoring. And then finally, both wearable and external medical devices. So both from traditional medical devices like weight scales and blood pressure monitors and cardiac monitor halters that you wear on your person, to even more of the consumer style devices now that are measuring activity and various biosensors and feeding that data back to the cloud for either a care team or family and personal advocacy in your healthcare to take advantage of. The important thing to acknowledge here is that there's many more segments in this that are growing. These are key segments that we're seeing rapid adoption in the marketplace. And so what are the value drivers of connected healthcare? And I think this is important because as the market started to explore connected healthcare and IoT enabling various components of the healthcare value chain, this started 12 to 15 years ago. There was a lot of science, there was a lot of technology, there was a lot of vision, but it's taken time for the marketplace to distill down to what are the key value drivers as to whether or not specific technologies and specific use cases are adopted. And I think these are four of the key areas. And first and foremost is improving patient outcomes. So does both the providers, the clinical care teams, and the patient yield improved outcomes as a result of having connected healthcare? And I think if you look at study after study, case after case, we're seeing strong improvements in the ability for care teams to intervene, the ability for care teams to help manage patient outcomes, and quite candidly, the next area, which is the patient and their family, being able to take an active role in the improvement of their outcomes and the delivery of their healthcare, having insightful visibility into what's happening with their disease state or what's happening with their healthcare outcome, and being able to manage that and make choices on how they do that. For example, there are tools and services available now where a patient's family can, for example, in diabetes, can monitor daily the performance of their loved one, typically sometimes an elderly a patient that may not live with them, but they can log into a portal and get visibility into how their loved one is managing their blood glucose and whether or not they're taking their medication, and if they're seeing any types of trends or disconnects in their care delivery. And so this has become really a significant lever in both improving outcomes and giving patients a sense of empowerment, giving patients a sense that they can impact and help manage their disease state. The third one is probably the one that most people would put at the beginning of the discussion. I and others have realized that it's an important lever, but if you don't get 1 and 2 right, the cost and the revenue impact typically doesn't yield correctly. And so it's taken a long time for the marketplace to start to perfect this, and for kind of the entire value chain to be able to identify where these opportunities for cost reductions are, and the opportunities for actually new services. And if you look at the alignment, I mean, for a long time we had a real imbalance between, kind of who gets the benefit of lower costs and lower incidence, lower hospitalization rates. It typically was the insurance payers, and now that kind of that payer, provider, and patient balance is starting to normalize so that everyone can participate in the balance. And then finally, public population impact. Obviously, the long-term solution in terms of having an impact, and now more than ever with COVID-19, this has become just a really critical discussion in terms of how to improve the capacity of healthcare delivery, how to monitor patients without them having to physically come into a clinic or a hospital. These are all really important levers on how to do that. And so if we look at kind of, are we as a society and a population ready for connected healthcare? I would say, as you look at the market data, and maybe we took an interesting snapshot of this back in late 2019, but as we look at what's happening now around the world with the COVID-19 crisis, there's no question that the market is ready. People are ready for this. The healthcare delivery system requires it in order to optimize that outcome. So looking at that, let me give you an example of a couple of use cases that have been enabled by this solution. The first use case that we're discussing is around congestive heart failure. And this is one of the chronic disease states that is so highly prevalent in most of the societies around the world. And at the same time, it's one that we have had kind of the least amount of technology available to intervene. Most patients are monitored and viewed by how their weight gain due to water retention is moving, as well as their blood pressure. But by the time caregivers see those changes taking effect, oftentimes the patient has already progressed to a crisis state and is potentially in a state where there's going to be a significant health event and or significant costs associated with hospitalization. And the new technology that we've had the privilege of being part of deploying is a new sensor that gets inserted into the pulmonary artery. Believe it or not, it's a Bluetooth sensor. This sensor is implanted into the pulmonary artery and can detect very, very minute changes in pressure in that pulmonary artery. And oftentimes, those pressure changes are somewhere between 7 and 10 days in advance of the traditional congestive heart failure symptoms of weight gain and blood pressure changes. And this gives both the patient and the care team much more advanced notice to try to manage that from being a crisis, to try to intervene and change patients' medications, change patient behavior, change patient diet in order to avoid that. And so this is kind of an example of the technology, the patient advocacy, the care team getting access to critical data in a connected healthcare world, and that is a critical component to making an impact. The other use case that I wanted to touch on very quickly before talking more specifically about the solution is clinical drug trials. And one of the areas, phase 3 of a clinical drug trial, is the point in which large populations of study participants are engaged, and double-blind tests are taking place. A lot of data is being acquired, and in the traditional model, data acquisition, data accuracy, and timeliness, speed at which that data from study participants is collected, can be a challenge. And so in implementing the solution between Core and Philips in terms of the HSDP platform, we've been able to improve the accuracy, maintain security and privacy, and accelerate the collection of that data, but more importantly, accelerate the compliance with which the data was collected from a protocol standpoint. A significant challenge in a drug trial is validating that the data collection was in compliance with the protocol to make sure that the data is valid. And the solution that we have enabled the market with helps not only validate that, but accelerate that to a great degree. If you look at kind of what's holding back connected health, there's obviously a Pareto, and there's a lot of thoughts and views on this, but the two biggest elements that we found that have been challenges, barriers, or kind of elements that are slowing adoption of connected health are the cost of the devices in the solution, as well as concerns about data privacy, security, and regulatory compliance. And what's exciting about this discussion between Core and Philips is that those two elements, which are almost 2 to 1 over everything else when you combine them, are the areas that we focused on in terms of reducing the cost, bringing the cost down dramatically to allow for a monthly service that provides for high quality but low cost gateway and data collection capability, economical sensors that can be used to collect biometric data, like Bluetooth sensors for weight scale, pulse oximeters, spirometers, cardiac monitors, and whatnot. And then, of course, the Philips HSDP platform, which is where this data is sent from the gateway, really gives us the global, secure, and private platform where this data is transmitted to, stored, and enabled for the end customer, whether that be a care workflow team, a hospital network, a clinical research organization, can come and retrieve that data in a very secure fashion. And Philips has ensured that data path and that data process has met the various regulatory requirements of each of the specific geographies where we offer this solution. And so I think the final kind of message that I'd like to end on before Odd talks about the Philips component to this is, the challenges that the market has seen have essentially been around adoption. Everyone has successfully or unsuccessfully tested various components to the solution. People have done science projects. People have tried small pockets of pilots and tests, but scaling this and bringing this to a market solution requires a fair amount of expertise. And the goal that we're trying to achieve at Core is to help customers deploy, manage, and scale the solution. And so letting our end customers focus on what they do best, which is deliver care, improve outcomes, manage the workflow of care delivery and success with patients. And we provide the tools, the infrastructure, and the managed services across that value chain to enable them to use that as if it's a utility, all within obviously the very high standards for both the healthcare and the life sciences space from a quality, regulatory, privacy, and security compliance standpoint. And so that's what we're getting ready to introduce to the market with Philips. We're very excited about it. We think there's a lot of opportunity, and I'd like to transition the conversation and reintroduce Odd from Philips to talk a little bit about the Philips HealthSuite digital platform.
Hi, Brian. Thank you for that. And Let me talk briefly about the HealthSuite digital platform, what it actually is, and why as Philips we've built out a platform, and why we did this with AWS as well. So Philips provides solutions in what we call the continuum of care, and that means we have solutions in the personal health space, healthy living space. We have solutions in the population health space. We have solutions around diagnosis in hospital treatment and when people get discharged from hospitals, or monitoring elderly at home. So in what we call this continuum of care, we have solutions, and those vertical solutions that Philips had traditionally become more and more like a patient-centric, in the sense that you want to carry a patient record across the entire care continuum. But in order for that to be a possibility, and in order for all the Philips businesses and solutions to collaborate very closely with ecosystem partners, we needed to have a platform that not only provided the scale and the cost point that is really crucial for this, but also allowed us to open up to externals. So what we have done as Philips, we've built a HealthSuite digital platform on top of the AWS capabilities. So we have been partnering with AWS for many years now, and we've put to the cloud a large instance of data applications for Philips, but also for our partners, for our customers out there, for partners like Core, who have solutions that need certain platform capabilities in the regulatory space. So if you talk a little bit about the HealthSuite digital platform, there's actually two sides to it. On one hand, what you heard from Brian was especially the regulatory, the compliance space, and that is something that is of utmost importance, because leaking PHI, getting fines for PHI, you need to be really, really careful with the data of our patients and adhere to all the local regulations. That's one aspect. So in order to achieve that, we've put in place across all of Philips' product space, but also across this platform, we put in place a very stringent information security management system or quality management system, and we have a number of certifications in the ISO space, in high trust and HIPAA and what more, that guarantee to our internal Philips solutions, but also to our external customers who leverage the platform, that whenever they leverage the platform and they build out on the platform, that it adheres to the highest security standards and compliance standards in the healthcare industry, and that is really important. That is core. That is the key to everything with it. So everything that we've done on top of AWS is talking about solutions, talking about services that make it easier for our customers to basically build out applications and then move them into the cloud. So let me talk a little bit. If you look at the pictures, what you see at the bottom, the AWS capabilities, and on top of that, in blue, you see the HealthSuite digital platform capabilities. I'm not going to touch on each and every one of them, but it is around how do we collect data, from what sources do we collect data, how do we manipulate the data, where can we store this data, how do we open it up to third parties, how do we do analytics. And on the top of the screen you see in green, that is the bespoke application. So that is actually what makes one healthcare application differ from another one. It is not the underlying platform layers. It's not how you store this regulatory data. It is what you do with that data. And the guarantees that I was talking about before, let me give you one small example. Across all of the services that we've built, we maintained, of course, a logging, but also all the audit trails. So especially in a pharma context, in a GXP, you need all your audit trails and all the information. You need to have that available in order for you to be able to present to the auditors the right evidence that you're fully compliant with the application. So talking a little bit about, well, how do you build then applications leveraging the HealthSuite digital platform, right? So it is around how do we collect data? So remotely managed devices, IoT solutions. So as Philips, we support both devices inside the hospital as well as a lot of devices at patients' homes or with consumers that actually connect, and we manage those devices. We collect data from device. We sometimes remotely control those devices. So taking in data from IoT devices. But it's typically is not only IoT data that's important. Typically, it's also important to take data from other sources. And if you're doing a remote patient monitoring or a clinical trial, you want to collect and you want to ingest data from other sources. You want to ingest, for instance, lab results or ePro reports that have been taken with applications at the patient's or at the subject's home. So you collect all that data and you store this data within the HealthSuite digital platform. Then next to that, this data has been stored. It can be forwarded directly to your own bespoke application, but you can also leverage some of the other capabilities to do analytics on this data. And just to give you one use case that we're doing with one of our customers, we're collecting with a number of patients in the UK. We're collecting data through IoT devices. We're storing this data. We're storing it in the cloud. And those patients with multiple comorbidities, they go about their daily routines. They have the GP visits. They have their episodes. They go into the hospital. And we are collecting this data for a year. And after the year, we mash up the data that from the normal patient pathway. We mash up the data with the collected data from the IoT devices. All this data is stored and mashed up in the HealthSuite digital platform. And out of that, we do some AI. We have HealthSuite Insights, our AI capability that allows to develop algorithms and to find the commonalities between the data and to find if there are specific triggers that leads to an episode with a patient. And ultimately, the goal of that is, of course, that GPs don't want patients to come to their office without need, especially now in the time of COVID. But also, they want patients to come to the doctor when it's really necessary. So there's a lot of this data manipulation, data storage, mashing up of data around across the board. So healthcare is all around standards. Healthcare is around HL7 integration. Healthcare is around a clinical data repository, so a Firestore. Healthcare is around all this integration and all those capabilities we've put together and made available to our customers to basically start building out their applications. So if we then take the next step, and what we're talking about here today is very much around the use within clinical trials. Yeah. So within clinical trials, to the right-hand side, you see is collecting data, but it is around the services that you need for Bluetooth pairing, the services that you need for changing out devices at the patient's home. How do you do that? How do you remotely control that? The services that Core provides that do all the logistics and help do all the operational side of it. But HealthSuite in the back, we have build out all the services that as a managed service we offer in Bluetooth integration. So this Bluetooth integration together with the cloud-based services of HealthSuite, storing the data either in the telemetry repository for device data, in a clinical data repository, if you want to build out an application like a trial management solution in the context of a patient, or an analytics solution. So all of those combined is the solution that we are providing. Specifically with Core, we're partnering up to do the front end of this, and that is making sure that there is a very trustworthy, a very efficient, and a very secure solution at the front end. How do you manage your trial? How do you manage your patients at home? How do you get the data from those patients securely throughout the trial across into the cloud? So these are all the services that, as the HealthSuite digital platform in this particular context, we're offering, and how we are actually collaborating with AWS and with Integron in providing these services. So on this, I want to give it back to Brian to conclude on the topic.
Thank you, Odd. And again, we're very excited about this offering that we're bringing to market together with Philips HealthSuite digital platform based on AWS and the core and Integron competencies. And again, the goal is to provide a suite of services and solutions that can be quickly adopted and scaled by customers. And this is now, I hate to be continuing to reemphasize this, but with what we've seen with the COVID-19 pandemic, this has now become an even more a more critical offering to the marketplace, because once we have these tools available from an adoption standpoint, they can be easily implemented. There isn't a significant amount of development, customization, and/or complex adaptation that needs to take place. These are tools that can be adopted quickly by the healthcare system, both caregivers, remote patient monitoring service providers, payers, hospital networks, a variety of different entities and clinical research organizations, because as you can imagine, there is a significant acceleration in the clinical drug trial space around this COVID-19 virus, and there's going to be a heavy focus on that into the near future to make sure that we're bringing a vaccine solution to the marketplace that can essentially stem the pandemic. So I wanted to thank Odd from Philips and the AWS team for hosting us today and giving us the opportunity to share this information. We're very excited about this, and we certainly are eager to engage with any of you if you have any questions or want to explore this solution that we've talked about here today. Thank you for attending, and we appreciate you taking the time to listen to us today. Thank you.